Hey guys, what's going on? Emo Temp is here today, and I've got another Nationals deck profile from you. I wasn't able to do this one in person, but I do have one of our world's competitors here, NA Worlds team members, Colin Rupert. Colin, say hi.
Hey guys.
Awesome. So Colin's here. Colin was playing this very, I want to say unorthodox for me, right? Because I personally hadn't been exposed to this, and I was honestly super scared running into this deck, and I'm glad I didn't. But this is Earth, Wind, FFCC, right? Am I getting that right?
Yep. Yep.
Cool. So this is the deck list, guys. It's a little interesting. Colin, why don't you go ahead and run us through some of these cards and tell us why, or tell us a little bit about the deck, honestly.
Okay. So little backstory to this deck. I actually didn't pick this up in the few weeks or months before Nats. This is actually like a couple of days before Nats. So John Schreiner is a very good friend of mine and pretty well known in the community for running the RV Returners tournaments on the weeklies on Wednesdays and Mondays. He came to me with this list and proposed using the new Yuri, and I was kind of skeptical at first because I was like, going through all of my mono index and all my iterations of like anything with Yuri in it, and I was just thinking to myself, this card can't be that great. So I'm initially looking at this list and I'm like, wow, this is kind of wild. Like, how do we make the promo Yuri work? And then I kind of realized like, hey, Chilinka's like party attack ability, kind of bypasses like the whole um, thing about like whether you run light Yuri or promo Yuri kind of just doesn't really matter. So that kind of worked for me. And then I realized how many actual cards that were FFCC in the deck, and I realized like, hey, hitting off Yuri is pretty nuts. Like maybe this card could actually work. So getting the four characters that are FFCC in play really wasn't that challenging. And from my experiences playing the deck at Nationals, there were many rounds where I had more than actual four characters of FFCC in play at once, multiple times. So I didn't find it difficult to actually make Yuri's like not be chosen by abilities stick, so to speak. So this deck is really kind of wild. There's a lot of little interactions that are kind of challenging to get used to at first, but once you start piloting the deck and playing, enough rounds with it, you start to get used to like all the little things that this deck has going for it. One really neat combo is obviously like the Ram and Yuri trick. Basically, if you get Ram and Yuri in play, essentially Yuri can't be chosen by ability, so it's hard to kill. Rem can't be dealt damage from multiple sources without reducing it, so she sticks most of the time, especially against ice decks. So you have the ability to, on your opponent's end step, activate Yuri, check the card on top. If it's an FFCC character, hey, you got a hit, so you add it to your hand. Activate Rem, go back and activate Yuri, do it again, and then start the process all over again on your turn. So that's really neat. If you have Layak, Rem, and you're in play, I can't even explain to you how like difficult it is to interact with this uh, board. It's just a wall, and if you get multiple triggers off Yuri and you hit multiple times, it's just like you drawing like 3, 4, 5 cards a turn. It's actually like crazy and insane to do that, and it's not outside of the box of possibilities either. It actually happens more times than you would think, even with just the one copy of Rem in the deck. Um, so that's really neat. Another really neat interaction you have is you have Zidane and Yuri. So with Legendary Zidane, obviously if you hit, with Zidane you get a forward out of your opponent's hand. His auto ability triggers. And then with that on a stack, what you can do is you can activate Yuri, check the top card. If it's an FFCC character, obviously add to your hand. Uh, and then you get to activate Yuri since it's a wing character off of Zidane's ability, and then kind of do it again for that turn if you really want to. Or you can just wait until wait till your opponent does something on their turn, and if they don't do anything or they don't attack and you don't see a reason to block, you just activate it again and check again. And if it's another card, it's like you drew 3 or 4 cards a turn. So it's like that whole combo is very relevant in a deck and also very interesting. Diabolus, obviously a great card. Same thing. Another interaction with Yuri, just start, drain your opponent's forward down to 1k, activate all your forwards, activate Yuri, check, block, do whatever you need to do. So a lot of sequencing things come up in this deck where you have to sequence everything correctly and plan out your turn and think ahead. So this deck, you cannot pick up this deck and just expect to do well with it your first time trying it. I was initially skeptical at first, but when John introduced me to the deck, I jammed probably like 10, 12 games of this deck, and I realized like how crazy and powerful this deck could be. So definitely a great choice for me this weekend.
Okay, so a few questions actually. First one is, so John Schreiner introduced. Shout outs to them, by the way, in the RBA guys. Did he make up this list, or did he find this list also? Where did this come from? Like, do we know that?
Okay. He didn't introduce me to this version of this list.
Okay.
I trimmed it down, cut it down, added some things. I cut some things. His list actually didn't run Fina. It actually ran 5-drop Cecil, EX Burst.
Mm-hmm.
And I was okay with this at first. The problem with EX Cecil in this deck, I felt like it didn't have the capabilities to do board wipes. And I realized, like, hey, if I'm not really playing Mono Winded Nats, I might as well just include Fina, because Fina is just a powerful card that is able to wipe your opponent's board, especially if they're on, like, any of these Water Lightning or Water Lightning X Vasoya decks, and Agrius decks that are running around. Like, they're all playing Layla Lightning, so you need to be able to, like, actually interact with that. So, like, Fina plus Chelinka obviously is a great, combo that I felt like the deck needed in order to really just handle those going wide boards, so to speak. Like, you don't want to get yourself caught into a situation where, like, you can't interact with, like, your opponent's, like, 3-4 forwards and you're just losing. So Fina and Chelinka is obviously a great way to deal with this. So I cut the Cecils, put in the Finas. We realized how powerful Mono Fire was in this meta after multiple days of watching Mono Fire do really well in, like, the RBA group, seeing Mono Fire finish high in the European 2-deck for their nationals, and we decided to cut Noctis for Y'shtola, mainly because Y'shtola has a lot more ways to interact with those decks, and obviously is great against Fire. So, like, it's very, very hard for Fire to, like, get Y'shtola off the board. And also, like, Y'shtola is great for protecting Yuri Valdez. It's great for protecting Zidane. It's great for protecting Yuri. Like, obviously, those little interactions work. And it's also it's another 7k for Carbuncle that, if we didn't have Noctis and Cecil in the deck, we needed another 7k to really interact with Carbuncle very well. So definitely include with that package. So those are kind of like the smaller changes. Another little minor change we made. I didn't run Mamudi in mine, the backup Mamudi, mainly because I felt like we had enough activation with Diabolos, Leak, Rem, like, and Yasmat. Like, there were multiple ways to, like, activate the monster Gigas in the deck. So, like, I didn't feel like not including a 18th backup was necessary. So I just ended up cutting it, and we just included another forward in the deck. I feel like the deck needed more forwards. So those are my changes to the deck. Obviously, he ran a different version of the deck during his tournament, and um, definitely if you're interested in the deck profile, hit him up. He knows more about the list than I do because he's obviously the one who came up with it. So,
Oh,
um, those are my those are basically my changes.
okay. And then second question is why four drops it in over the three drop? I know normally people use the three drop as a way to like facilitate like control and like I guess help a deck make it to where it needs to in the game. What made you? Was this a change that you made as well, or was this part of the original list?
This was actually part of the original list. We during our testing periods for Nets, especially after Euros, we realized like how many decks were running just like above the curve amounts of forwards, like 27, 28, 30 forwards, depending on what meta list they were running. Um, and they were all running less summons to actually deal with Zidane. So while Zidane was obviously not as great against like a mono fire deck, for example, that ran like 9 or 10 summons, um, Zidane actually stuck mainly against all those decks that ran multiple forwards or above the curve numbers of forwards that um, didn't really interact with him well, especially in like the Mughals list, the Agrius list. Let's see, other Earth Wind lists that they were running Diabolus obviously, but like not much else. So like obviously Zidane is just going to like sit there for a while, and honestly, if Zidane sticks and hits in the early game, like it can be very very impactful to get like multiple triggers off of him. So we felt like four drop Zidane was perfect for the deck. Not only because of the ability, but like also another reason to have Carbuncle in the deck to interact with it. Like you can just make Zidane a 9K if they decide to block. So that was very. I think the card was very very meta-callish, so to speak. I don't think it's going to last probably until Opus 10, but definitely was good for Nats environment. I think people are basing their two deck lists off of like the Nats in Euros. So having Zidane as a um, kind of like a tech card against those decks really made sense. So that was kind of the reason for the four drop over the three drop.
Okay, cool. All right, so take us through the list. Let's go card by card.
Okay.
Forward.
Undead Princess. I'll just start from the beginning.
Yeah.
Undead Princess, easy discard, easy searcher off of Epitaph. Um, we want to have the ability to not be able to block in late game if they're on like 4 or 5 points of damage. Like being able to get through those last couple points is pretty critical. So like Undead Princesses obviously include another FFCC character, so another potential to flip with Yuri. Not too much else to say there. Card's just really really great, and it also breaks our Earth backups for space on our backup line. Ishtola, I think I went over this before, just a great protector for Chelinka, Galdez, Lorcaicus, and Zidane, or a Remini Yuri. Just protects everything, is great against fire, just cancels a summon for free, so it definitely stops Diabolus plays. Chelinka, not much to say about Chelinka. Everybody knows, I think, what this card does by now. Being able to just do board wipes against singular target forwards or against their board if they're playing like Wind Water or Igris decks with like Layla Vikings. Just a great include as an auto ability. Galdez, again, not much else to say about this card. Been very, very impactful since Opus 7 was released. Very hard to deal with. Also, another FFCC character to get with Yuri. Archaicus, definitely a 3 of. I would not go any lower than 3 on this card. It's great for recycling Layax, Gigas, Luminous Puma, and then also you need him to search up Death Gaze if you need spot removal. So very, very good include with the deck. Also another FFCC character for Yuri. So much synergy with this card. And it's also an easy Earth discard if you need Earth CP for your backup line. So not too much else to say there. Zidane, again, for the reasons I said previously, want to be able to deal with like the high cost, high forward curve meta decks, and it's great early and probably not so great late, but in the later stages of the game. But still very impactful with Yuri triggers and for board stalls. Also works with Carbuncle. Rem, I can't say how much I love this card. Definitely thinking about including 2 instead of just 1. So if I were to make changes to the deck, definitely probably a second copy of Rem would be my first step. Just being able to get free activations for all your forwards during your turn and activating Rem just at the end step is just, it's so impossible for Ice to deal with. I can't even explain. Outside of a Sid Alstein, I can't think of a single way that Ice can really interact with this card very well. Yuri, obvious reasons, the whole point of the deck. Just want to be able to like check multiple times, see if there's FFCC characters on top, draw through your cards, see as many cards as possible. Even if you do like hit relevant like forwards like Fina or Yasmat or Shantoto or stuff that like obviously is a good card, but is one-ofs in the deck. It's not the end of the world. You have Luminous Puma to like cycle back all your forwards, and then you have a Jito Marajito in the deck as a backup to get back your summons. So definitely not a hindrance if you actually mill a Diabolos off the top or a Laic off the top. You have ways to get them back. So everything kind of recycles itself. Fina, obviously 3 as a board wipe for what I said previous with Jelenka. Just want to be able to like get rid of those Layla Viking decks and get yourself the advantage. 1 copy of Yasmat, basically another tech card against Ice. Like we wanted to be able to beat the Ice decks. You want to be able to just activate characters if we have to. We want to be able to break 5-cost things that we don't want to deal with 9Ks. Just a great card to include as a one-of, and also we can recycle it with Luminous Puma. So yeah, just a great way to interact with those Ice decks that are annoying and aggressive. So you may be wondering why there's 1 copy of Forward Shantoto from the new starter deck and 1 backup Shantoto in the deck. And the reason is simple. So we're running 3 copies of Star Sybil. So in multiple matchups, obviously your game plans change based on what you're playing. You want to be able to interact with Ice decks, but you also want to be able to interact with your Fire decks or your Agrius decks. And so obviously when you're coming up against your Ice decks, you want to search the 9CP Shantoto, mainly because you want to be able to like break Duke Lard. You want to be able to break Edward. Like you need to be able to get rid of these like very relevant cards on the board to basically stop their forwards from becoming bigger or canceling out your summons like Diabolos that are critical in the matchup. So forward Shantoto is very, very important to have here. Also, in the decks that go wide, obviously you're going to search the backup Shantoto. Like you want to be able to have the option to just wipe their board at any one time, and building up to that, 3 CP and then just discarding 2 for the backup Shantoto really isn't that difficult with the deck, seeing as how you have Norshtalin and your Star Sybil to like get you an advantage early in the game. So all in all, those are mainly the 2 reasons to have both copies, but also the primary reason is you have Undead Princess. So if you just happen to run into a matchup where you played your Shantoto early, wiped their board, and you can't get rid of, obviously you can't play Shantoto while the other Shantoto's in play, so like you need to be able to like break it. So Undead Princess is a great way to just get rid of that backup and just play the 9CP one if you had to. So all in all, even though they're just 1 copies of each in there, I think it's obviously very easy to tutor out Undead Princess, so you don't have to worry too much about that. And also it's easy to search up both Shantotos with Star Sybil, so you have that option available to you. Summons in the deck, 3D Ebolas, not much to be said there. Carbuncle works with all your 7Ks. Recycles itself. Um, you're able to block bigger forwards and just get value out of it. So, really not much else to say about that package. One copy of Death Gaze. Obviously, you need spot removal to deal with, forwards that your opponent may play that you just have a hard time interacting with. Just play Chronicles, search it up off of like a layout trigger or something, and then just get rid of it the following turn. So very, very important to have one copy of Death Gaze in the deck. Layak card speaks for itself. You want to activate everything, get multiple Yuri triggers, so on and so forth. Gigas. So this card is mainly included in the deck as a 2 of, primarily because of your ice decks, or I guess it would be against fire too. It's just a big body, hard to deal with. You can always activate it in your opponent's attack step, and I just have a big beefy blocker, and if your opponent doesn't have ways to interact with it, it's usually always going to either block something for free or just trade. So obviously, it's a great card, especially as an Earth card to discard for CP early in the game when you want to be able to just get your backup line in play. Also, it's recyclable with Larkhikus, so you want to have that option available to you. Even if it does trade, you're able to bring it back and just present threats that are hard to deal with and put up that wall that we were talking about earlier. Basically, you want Gigas, you want Galdez in play, you want Ishtola, you want Ram and Yuri. You want to be able to have all these hard to deal with forwards that are just super impossible to deal with without using multiple cards on your opponent's side to just interact with them. So Gigas is like super important in the deck, in my opinion. And then Luminous Puma, just a one of. We want to be able to recycle all of our forwards, and there's not much else to be said about the card. Like, you can just return it on Orkikis. You can search for it. If you're not seeing much action, it's just a great way to get back things that you've already used, or you need to just dig a little deeper for discards for your important plays. And then as far as our backup lines, the backup line is pretty standard for FFCC characters. Like, we have our 3 North Talon. We want to be able to search up all of our FFCC backups, our Waltrill, our Alhanalem, our Lael for CP. And then if we already have those backups in play, we can always search up our searchers, Epitaph, Ilaria. So great way to dig for backups with a backup, so to speak. So we're not really losing much advantage either. And if you notice about like all of these cards in Earthwind's always been about recycling. And what does this deck do? This deck recycles very well. Like, we don't have to worry about our discards most of the time. Every time we play North Talon, I guarantee you I'm probably either discarding either Larkhikus and probably a monster, or a Yuri, or a 6-drop forward that we don't really need at the time, or an Undead Princess and a Layak, or something along the lines. We can always get these cards back, so like we don't have to worry about our discards playing our backup line. So we wanted, initially we were going to do 3 Ilaria and 1 Epitaph, but we realized how much more powerful Epitaph was in the deck, just because we could search up that many more forwards. So we just cut the 3rd Ilaria, we put in a 2nd Epitaph. So now there's just 2 of each. And I definitely wouldn't change that going ahead for like Opus 10. Like, if I were to play the deck again, certainly we keep this package here. You may be wondering why there's 1 Semilafina and 3 Star Sibyl in the deck. Mainly because, like, obviously we want to have the ability to like search backups with backups. So like Star Sibyl for Semilafina is like a play we can do, but it's not critical that we have Semilafina in play for the Star Sibyl, so to speak. Star Sibyl gains its advantage later in the game anyway for its action ability. So we don't much care about like actually discarding extra cards for it, although it is nice obviously having like the Semilafina in play. It's not a be-all end-all for the card. So it's definitely still just a one-of. I certainly wouldn't change it going forward. You don't necessarily need to have like Semilifina in play at all times, and it doesn't really come up too often where like you're using the action ability of Semilifina to just like hit something for 1k and killing it. Although it does happen in certain situations, it's not very often. So, not very critical. We have three Semilifina in the deck. Also, there's really not enough space to really cut anything for it, so I'm not. It wasn't a critical part of the package for the backup line. Monogito Margito, I will not change this card. It's a searcher for Star Sibyl. You're able to recycle your summons. Obviously, this is a recycle deck, so you want to be able to like get back the critical summons you need later in the game. Really, the only reason the card's in here, I mean, there's cool tricks you can do. Like obviously, off 3, you can dull 3, discard, play Gino Margito, play your Diabolos for free, break something, activate, etc. But still just a one-of, so I wouldn't change that. Apururu, obviously we want to be able to search for that 5th backup off of Star Sibyl, so if we get the 3, we can dual 3, discard, play Star Sibyl, search up Apururu if we had to, play the 5th backup, get a character back, recycle it, and pass the turn. That's a great way to get the 5 and get the 5 fast. So definitely going forward, going to keep this card in the deck. And then Shantoto, you want to have the option to play against this decks that want to go wide. They want to be aggressive. So and also you can tutor it off of Star Sibyl, obviously. So that's pretty much the backup line for the deck. So we went over summons, monsters, backups, forwards. I don't think there's anything else, really.
No, that's fine. So the real thing, I guess, my last question for you is before we wrap up here is what happened? For honestly, this deck is again, to me, it's super scary. It looks super solid. I'm gonna play it this weekend at locals. I hope no one like kills me for it because this thing is dangerous. But so what happened to Nats? Like I hope I'm not like opening up a fresh wound here. But like tell me what happened, man. Like what were your losses and like throughout the day too?
Not at all. So obviously, I didn't get to play the deck every single. Well, I shouldn't say that. I played the deck obviously every match I played, but I lost to mono fire list. I lost to Lopez's mono fire, and if you I don't know if he posted his deck list on FFTCG or not, but his version ran like a complete package of summons and Veritas. So like that deck kind of crippled my ability to stabilize with a solid board on a regular basis. Like I felt Yuri was very useless. I felt Zidane was very useless. I felt like Chelenko was like useless, just because he had so many ways to disrupt it. So like that was one of my losses. I won against all of the ice decks I played in the tournament. I pretty much won against. So going forward, I think that this deck has a very, very strong matchup against ice. But against your medium range decks and your fire decks, I don't think the deck does as well. I will say so. If you're planning on taking this to a locals or a bigger event, moving forward, just keep in mind, like, you're going to have your tough matchups against your Igris lists. You're going to have a tough matchup against Mono Fire. And it is not an easy deck to play. There are a lot of decisions that you have to make. So if you do plan on taking this list, get in as many games with it as possible before you go into a tournament. You can't just pick up this list and just run with it. It is not that easy. So all in all, though, my Nats experience was really great. Obviously, I didn't finish as well as I would have liked to, but I definitely don't regret my decision taking this deck. I didn't end up going 6-1 day one of Nats. So overall, my Swiss experience was really great. Definitely Top Cut was not my best experience for other reasons, but I won't get into them here. We're just doing a deck tech. So yeah. But for the most part, I really, really enjoyed taking this list. I'm glad that I got a chance to pilot it, and a huge event like that. And big shout out to John for introducing me to something so great. I definitely I wouldn't have been able to have such a great deck list without him. So yeah, that was pretty much my dad's experience. Like for Swiss, the deck is amazing. It will get you through that Swiss rounds, and if you're playing really well that day, if you're piloting it great, it's definitely something to keep a lookout for. It's very, very relevant deck, and it's very, very real. So that's pretty much my take on it.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much, Colin. I really do appreciate you taking the time to come on here and tell us about this list. For everyone listening, give a round of applause to these guys coming up with these crazy ideas. And if you have any questions, obviously, I hope you don't mind, Colin, that if people hit you up.
No, not at all.
Awesome.
Yeah, if you want to message me anytime, I'm always down to talk shop. And
awesome, man. There you go. All right, guys. Well, again, thanks for watching. Colin, thanks for being here, and we'll see you guys later.